I'm Dr. Ira Lake, and welcome to the Dr. Lake Show. Today, I want to talk about something that has not really been discussed a lot in recent years. It's grief and bereavement. Grief and bereavement. Over the last 15 to 20 years, more and more people are suffering from grief-related symptoms or bereavement-related symptoms. People have lost loved ones, or they have lost a job, or they moved to different areas. All that's considered loss, which causes a negative emotional reaction. We call that grief. So today I have a special guest, and I want to spend a few moments letting our guest tell her story and how grief affected her. And I want you, the viewer, to listen carefully, for there might be some things that you may be going through that you have ignored, and maybe her story will ignite something in you so you can get help just like she did as well. Our special guest today is not a stranger to me. It's someone I know very well. It's my wife of 3 years. Her name is Sarah. Hi Sarah, how are you doing?
Good.
I met Sarah in the summer of 2013. On our first date, we met for church, and we hit it off right then and there. We were sitting side by side in church, and they were singing the praise songs, and I started singing them, and she leaned over and said, "Boy, you sound good." So I started singing even louder. And after church and that, we went outside, and in the middle of the summer, we were talking, and we didn't want to leave each other. And so we decided to go have some light meal, and we talked for another 3 hours there, and left after about that 3-hour period. And about 30 minutes later, you decided you wanted to go walking, and you invited me to come visit you in your home for the first time, meet your family, and then go for a walk at Mount Rubidoux. You remember that?
Yes.
And it was on that date that our story really unfolded. How we had been mirroring each other by way of moves, and how we were seemed to be destined to kind of converge together to meet.
Yes.
And we were sitting there on that Saturday night, hot Saturday night, at the foot of the mountain, at the base of that cross.
Yes.
And you started telling your story about your son. And you started crying that day, and you thought I would never see you again. Why was that?
Because nobody cries on their first date.
We walked down the hill in silence, because what she had revealed to me about her son, and I told her some of my story, we didn't know what to say. And yet, the next day we met again. So, Sarah, let's talk about some of that story that you revealed to me that night. Your son had passed. Talk about your son for a minute.
When I met you, my son had been dead for 11 years, and I had not finished my grieving process. I was actually at the point where I was hitting a rock bottom. He was and at the time when I met you, you realized that I hadn't finished that it was like it was yesterday that I had buried him. And so you had suggested that I needed counseling, which I had done in the past, but I didn't feel that it was helping me, so I stopped. And but because I wanted to continue seeing you and dating you, I decided I better get my act together. So I went back to my counselor and said, "Let me finish my therapy."
So, while you were telling the story, and I think I said to you, how long ago did your son die? Because the intensity and the pain the way you described your son, I saw so much pain, and I saw the intensity of it. And I think I said to you, you still need some help.
Yes.
And I think I said, I want to be in your life, but you get to choose the role. I either am going to be your counselor, or I'm going to be your friend trying to be your boyfriend.
True. So I chose to go to counseling. So the very Monday after we met on Saturday, I called Dr. Perez and resumed my counseling. And it was godsend, because I think we were meant to meet. And as soon as I met you, all my breakthroughs started coming through. First with Dr. Perez, then going to church and seeing the hymn on the screen really, really spoke to me. And it was I'd seen that hymn for so many times, but it didn't mean anything until I read it that Sabbath in church. And the words finally came through, and I realized that was God speaking to me, and that was my second breakthrough. So it was a godsend.
So talk a little bit about your son for the listening audience.
My son was 18 years old when he was diagnosed with cancer. He was an honor roll student, and when he had symptoms of chest pain and shortness of breath, I didn't think much about it because at the time he was going through classes for scuba diving. And so I thought the weight of what he was doing and the intensity of the class was producing these chest pains, until one day when he came home, all of a sudden I just saw his face, and he was so emaciated, and it was when it struck me that something was wrong. And so we made an appointment to see the physician, and that's when they discovered that he had a chest tumor. And from there on it just snowballed, and it wasn't long before he died.
Now, you said that he had suffered from an unusual form of cancer that only strikes males?
Yes. He was diagnosed with germ cell tumor, which is the kind of tumor that Lance Armstrong was diagnosed with, except that with his tumor, it didn't settle in the testicles like it normally does. It settled in his mediastinum, which makes it what real estate people call as location. For him, it was also location. This made it deadly. And
because it settled in his chest?
Yes, it was right on top of his heart.
Wow.
And at the time that they discovered it, it was already the size of a basketball, and it had meshed itself around the aorta, and it was just all over his chest. So that's why he was having the shortness of breath and chest pain.
Wow. So I know that there are 5 stages, according to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, 5 stages of death or grieving. But to get the news that your only son had a rare form of cancer, how did that affect you emotionally initially?
Shock. Shock that somebody who's healthy, someone who is an honor roll student, someone who is a good citizen, I was thinking, why? Why him? I mean, why not the people who are on drugs? Why not the people who are involved in gangs? Why my son? He was a good boy, a good person, a good student. Why would he be going through something like that?
Did you get mad with God?
Not initially, no. I think the anger came after he died. And I think that I wasn't angry at first because my son was very strong in his faith. And I remember when I went out to talk with him privately, because I wanted him alone. I wanted to discuss the illness and what had happened, just him and I. And he had said, "Don't worry, Mom," he said, just like in the Bible, when God said to Satan, "You can touch Job, you can take everything from him, but you cannot take his life." He says, "I am in the same position. Satan is trying to attack me. He's going to use my body. He's going to make me go through suffering. But my heart belongs to God. My decisions belong to him." So that really strengthened me. It made me feel that we could make it.
And of course you went about, because I know you went about looking for the best doctors and the best medical advice that you can get. And what happened?
Well, we started chemo and radiation. He actually went through the stem cell transplant program as well. That failed. Basically, after that, they just sent him home to die because there was nothing else that they could do for him. Instead of the cancer disappearing, it was actually growing, and it had metastasized to his spine. And so we knew at that point that was deadly. There was no recovery.
Wow, that's pretty intense. And so how long before, since the diagnosis till his demise or death? How
11
long?
months.
11 months. And you were there basically around the clock.
Yes, I took time off from work. I was very grateful that I was able to stay with him from the beginning all the way to the end. And I remember when he was very sick, and there were nights when he couldn't lay down. He actually had to sleep in a sitting position. I would just pray for morning because night was unbearable. And initially I used to pray, and I used to ask the Lord, I said, please take my son, let him die in his sleep, don't let him suffer. And then one day I realized that is a stupid prayer. I said, oh God, please don't listen to me. I wasn't thinking right when I asked for that. I don't want my son to die in his sleep. I don't want him to die alone. I want him to die with me in my arms. I want him to know that he's loved. And God was good. He allowed me to be there when Roy died, surrounded by his family.
And so after the wonderful ceremony that was done to honor him, talk about how it affected you emotionally once you realized that he had passed.
I couldn't function at work. My work, I was starting to fade in and out of work, and people at work told me that I needed to take time off, but I just couldn't see myself taking time off, because if I took time off, then I would be thinking about his death all the time. So I figured if I just work and work and work and concentrate on work, I wouldn't be thinking about it. But it suffered. And I eventually had to leave work because while I was there, I had been at this job for 11 years, and so while I was there, the doctors, the nurses, and one doctor in particular came to me and he said, I don't know what to say to you. He says, I see you and I want to say something, but I don't know what to say. And other times when we were in the rooms and we were talking about just life in general, and I would say, yeah, I remember my son, and people would be very quiet. And I realized they were uncomfortable talking about the fact that my son had died. And I eventually left work because I couldn't deal with the people looking at me and not knowing what to say. And even though I wanted to talk about him, and it was okay for me to talk about him, people shut you down. People don't know how to react to you, don't know what to say. So I just figured it was easy to leave.
Hold that thought, Sarah. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
Five Star Automotive, your one-stop shop for all your automotive needs. Here at 5 Star Automotive, you're always family. So you can come on in and relax, knowing that we specialize in oil changes, brake jobs, tune-ups, engine repairs, foreign and domestic cars. You say you're running low on cash? No problem. We have some financing programs that can help you pay later and get on the road today. So come on down to 5 Star Automotive, located here in the beautiful city of San Bernardino, California.
Welcome back to the Dr. Lake Show, where today we're talking about grief and bereavement. So Sarah, let's talk more about your story. Tell the viewing audience, what kind of work do you do?
Operating room nurse.
And so once your son had passed and you decided to go all in for work, but you were losing your focus and your concentration, your work was suffering, people around you were not knowing what to say, it was
Correct.
kind of awkward.
Correct.
And so what finally convinced you to take some time off to do some grieving?
I couldn't sleep. I was having trouble sleeping, and I had gone to see my primary care physician, and I had asked for sleeping pills. And she says, I will give you the sleeping pills. However, you need to go to counseling first. I said, okay. I called hospice because they have group therapy.
Yes.
And I called and I said, hi, my name is Sarah Tun, and I just lost my son to cancer, and I would like to sign up for your program. This was voicemail. No one answered the phone. But the return call never came back. So I said, oh, forget it. So I didn't go. But
Wait. You mean to tell me you called
yes,
a place to get some counseling or to
Yes.
be a part of a support group, left a message, and no one called you back?
no one called me back.
So you took that as a sign that you didn't need it.
That I didn't need it. But I figured, okay, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to call them a second time because maybe they were busy. You know, sometimes calls don't get through. So I called a second time and I said, hi, my name is Sarah, and I lost my son to cancer, and I gave them the date when he died, and I said I would like to sign up for group therapy. Nobody called. So I said, oh, fine. I'm going to do this all by myself. I'm going to find my own healing.
So I like to know, and the viewing audience would like to know, what are some of the things you decided to do that would help you deal with the loss of your son?
I did two things. I started to write. I would write how I was feeling, how I was doing. I did journaling. So I have a couple of books on what I was going through, what my emotions were during that time. And then I picked up running. I started running on the riverbed, and I remember going on the riverbed every weekend. It was my routine. And I don't know that I knew what I was doing, except that the running and being alone on the riverbed, I could yell and scream at the top of my voice, and nobody cared because there was no one there. I was there by myself. And it was my time to yell at God, to scream at Him, to ask Him why. Why did He take my son? And so, to me, those two things were a big part in the healing process. Talking to God and doing my running, getting all that frustration and all that anger out of my body, out of my system, and journaling.
And so what you've described are two basic steps in the grief process. The first one is shock or denial. I don't believe this has happened. I'm numb to it. I just don't think what I'm sensing is true. And then when you realize that it is true, there is this anger. Why? These questions of why did this have to happen? Why not somebody else? Why me? And that's what you just described. So were you finding that things were getting better as you did your own self-therapy?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
I was able to go back to work, not at the same place. I moved from place to place because it was just easy. It was just easy to go to different hospitals and put in my time and walk away without making any commitments or making any friendships or attaching myself to anyone.
Now that's another one of those grieving processes. It's in stage one where you are isolating
Yes.
and you are in denial. And so when I met you now 11 years later, you were still in a form of stage one. And you still had some stage two of anger in you. Now, you were moving around from hospital to hospital, not creating friendships and just working. So you actually became a workaholic.
Yes.
So, tell me about that. Tell me a typical day for you. And this is a way that people deal with loss. They become so involved with other things that they use their work or something else to help them to forget what they've experienced or what they've lost.
I worked anywhere from 12 to 18 hours a day. I worked every weekend, every holiday, anything to get away from being at home, anything to get away from the stress, anything to get away from the pain. I would do anything to get away from being at home, 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 anything to get aw no family commitments. My family would have Mother's Day gathering, I wouldn't go. They would have birthday gatherings, I wouldn't go. They had Christmas time, I wouldn't go. Any social event in the family, I avoided them. My excuse, I was on call at work. I had to go to work. And it was legitimate because I was on call, I was working. And that was my excuse for not showing up to any of the social events.
Were you, Sarah, sometimes afraid to be alone and the silence of being alone where you have to think about and process what had happened?
Absolutely. Yes, it's terrifying because you go over in your head from beginning to end and you wonder, did I do everything right? Did I say everything that I needed to say? Mm. What could have I done to prevent XYZ from occurring?
That's a deep emotional journey. And were you finding answers? Were you finding a way to process this in a way where you can get some closure?
No. No, the anger was still there. The pain was still there. I think that was the hardest thing, is the pain. Mm. You wake up and you feel like you're hungry. You eat, but there's no filling. And you get up, and every day you have this need to eat or something that you just feel hungry, but it's never satisfying. You're always empty.
Wow. Some people believe that you can get over things quickly, and some can, but there is no timetable for grief. It's just like the waves of the ocean. Sometimes there is a steady coming of the waves, and you feel the pain, the loss. And then there are times when the waves are delayed. It may be 20 minutes before the next wave, or in this case, it could be weeks where you don't feel the pain as intensely. And then you will say to yourself, wow, I must be over it, I'm okay. And then you get triggered again, and here it comes again, all over again. And it reminds you of what you've lost, and you relive it. And so there is no timetable for grief. And for those of you that are looking at this program and you're in a similar position that Sarah was in, please do not give up. Please do not think that something is wrong with you. Everybody grieves differently, and again, there is no timetable for it. It could last years. But just know that the longer it lasts, it sets you up emotionally for some deeper emotional problems. And so it is always a good thing to get help. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Today, oh, on the lake until the rising sun.
Welcome back to the Dr. Lake Show, where today we're talking about grief and bereavement. So Sarah, let's hear more about your story and how grief affected you. You're now a workaholic. You're not really processing your grief. You're isolating yourself. You've got a lot of anger. You are running. You are journaling. But emotionally, really, where were you?
Lost. I couldn't make myself attached to anyone, and I prayed every day, every day. I said, Lord, just take me home.
You wanted to die yourself.
I couldn't believe that 11 years later I was still here on this earth when my daily prayer was, I want to die. And I didn't commit suicide because the Bible teaches us that God is the giver of life. Who are we to take our own life? But I wouldn't eat. I'd stop eating for days. I figured if I can't commit suicide, I can help
You could help the
I can help
process
the
along.
process, and I wouldn't be guilty of committing suicide. But I didn't do it didn't last very long.
So you're not sleeping well. A lot of interrupted sleeping. You're not eating consistently. You are taxing yourself by working 12 to 18 hours, basically 7 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to those of you that are viewing this, that is the exact recipe for depression. The lack of eating, the inconsistent sleeping, and the overtaxation of yourself physically. It's just a matter of time before you burn out. And like I said, when you see those three elements together, that's depression. And interesting enough, you in the medical field, or at least most people in the medical field, are least resistant to getting help. They always felt they could do it themselves.
Yes.
But you could see yourself steadily going down,
Yes.
the will to live. And so I even recall when I met you, and your cry was so intense, it literally scared me. And I said to myself, I said, wow, she's really in a lot of pain. And now I can understand why. And so did things kind of come to a head, or what happened next in this process of you trying to deal or not really deal with your grief?
At the time that I met you, that was the lowest point that I'd ever been in my entire life. I really, really wanted to die, but at the same time, I figured I'd go on dates, and if it happened, it happened. But I do remember when I met you, I was still thinking, Lord, you can take me whenever you want to, because I'm ready.
And you know, you mentioned that, Sarah. You mentioned a few times about dying. And I said to you, I want to live. Why you want to die? I want somebody that wants to live. I want to do things. And that's when I thought, I put on my clinical hat. I really tried not to diagnose you, but it was so apparent that you really were stuck in a grieving moment or moments, and that you didn't know how to get out of it. And that's when I gave you the gentle ultimatum, get some help. Either I'll do it, but I can't be your boyfriend, or I'll be your boyfriend, you go get the help. Now I wanted you to go get the help someplace else. And you went back to your therapist that you had gone to before,
Yes.
and immediately things began to happen.
Yes.
Tell the next part of that story.
I want to reinforce what you said. When I went to see the therapist again, she had said the same thing you said. There is no statute of limitation on how long it takes you to grieve. And that made an impact in my brain, because when you're in a funk for 11 years, you wonder what is wrong with you that you can't lift yourself out of it. Especially if you call yourself a Christian and you trust in God, you believe in God, but you can't get out of it. You think, okay, my faith must not be good. My faith must not be strong enough to get me out of this funk. And so when she said that everybody grieves at a different rate, at a different time, differently, and she said, there is no statute of limitations on grieving. She says, God doesn't expect you, if it takes you 11 years to get through the desert, that's fine, as long as you make it through the desert. And so that really stuck with me when she said that. So you mentioning it and her saying it, helped me with that. And another one of the breakthroughs that occurred was meeting this lady who had lost her husband from a fatal heart attack, and then a year later she lost her 2 children in a car accident. And she said she had a choice of going into depression or isolating herself, and she gave herself a mantra, and she says, I choose to find love. I choose to be happy. She says, I choose to be happy. She would tell herself every day, I choose to be happy, I choose to be happy. And when she told me her story, I realized that I wasn't the only one, and that I could do the same thing that she did. I choose to be happy. I choose to be happy. So I had to tell myself every day, I choose to be happy. I choose to want to live.
Actually, that's choose happiness. I want to go back and fill in a few little details about that story, about your story. When I met you, you had been listening to a cassette.
Yes.
That's how long ago that this incident had taken place.
Yes.
They were making cassettes then. But you had visited a church where I was the pastor.
Yes.
Talk about that.
So I had gone to Good Samaritan Church, I don't know, 1997, 99, and the person who was presenting the sermon that day had a message that was just captivating. It was meant for me, and I was so impressed by what he said that I ordered the cassette. And as I reflect back, I realized God was starting to prepare me for what was going to happen, because a lot of events were occurring that I was going to need later during my son's illness and recovery. And the story that he had in there was about his father dying. And what captured my attention was he said that he had the outstanding privilege of giving the benediction upon the life who had given him life. And that phrase stuck with me for all those years. And after my son had died, I would listen to that tape over and over and over again. One, it would bring back the pain of losing my son. But two, it reminded me that God answered my prayer, because I said, I would like to give thanks for the life that he had given me through my son. And so I had the privilege of giving the benediction upon the life that I had brought into this world, just like he had done.
So the second breakthrough was actually meeting the speaker in his home.
Yes.
And I had a little something to do with that, but you met him within days of our starting
Correct.
to date.
Correct.
And that's when you met his wife, who had lost,
His wife, her husband, and her 2 children.
she had lost her then husband, her former husband, and 2 children.
And she was the one who said, I choose to be happy.
So that was your second breakthrough. Now you're processing your grief. You are learning to accept it. You're not in denial. You're living in that pain.
Mm-hmm.
Some people choose to run from their pain. They'll run to drugs or alcohol. They'll run to work. People are running all the time. They don't want to face it. But I am a believer that people are healed by facing and going through their pain, not running from it. And so if you are grieving, if you have lost someone, don't run from it. Don't overwork. Don't try to hide it or mask it. It will just resurface again and again. Deal with it. And you will find that there are a lot of communities of people who are experiencing loss or who have experienced loss like you do. And there is something comforting to know that you are not alone when you have lost someone. And so fill in the last part of your story. You gotten a couple of breakthroughs. What's going on now with you?
Well, I had the breakthrough with Dr. Perez. Then I had the breakthrough with Pastor Lason's wife. And then my third breakthrough came when I was at church. And you were at the front because you were going to be the speaker at the church. And they were singing Because He Lives.
Because He lives.
Because He lives. And I had sung that hymn so many times, but it was just a hymn. And that day, the words on the screen, Because He lives, really, really sunk in. And it was as if the Lord was talking to me and telling me, because I live, there is a tomorrow.
Hmm.
And you were up there, your back was to me, and I was crying because I finally read the words and I finally understood what the words meant. And I felt that healing had finally come to my door.
Hmm. Hmm. That's a powerful testimony. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
5 Star Automotive, your one-stop shop for all your automotive needs. Here at 5 Star Automotive, you're always family. So you can come on in and relax, knowing that we specialize in oil changes, brake jobs, tune-ups, engine repairs, foreign and domestic cars. You say you're running low on cash? No problem. We have some financing programs that can help you pay later and get on the road today. So come on down to 5 Star Automotive, located here in the beautiful city of San Bernardino, California.
Welcome back to the Dr. Lake Show, where today we're talking about grief and bereavement. Let me give you a little side note to the story. On that cassette tape that you had been listening to for 11 plus years, every day you heard my voice.
Yes.
I was introducing this guest speaker. He was a professor here at the School of Religion at Loma Linda University. At that time, I was pastoring a church in Orange County. I had invited him to speak, and you were there, but I didn't know you. But for 11 years, you've been listening to my voice.
Your voice, introducing the speaker.
And who would have thought that we would have not only get introduced, but you got your healing, and we became eventually husband and wife.
Yes.
Boy, that's a double blessing.
I think the Lord knows what He's doing, and He knows what we need, because during those 11 years, I heard your voice, and yet when I met you, I had no idea who you were. Until you said your name, I had no idea who you were. But I know that God sends you the right person at the right time, even 11 years later.
We were actually walking up on Mount Rubidoux, and as I recall it, the sun was setting and you were on the outside path, and you turned to me and you said, "What is your last name?" Now, we had been together all day, our first date. You never asked me my last name, never came up. And you asked me, and I said, "My last name is Lake." And you literally stumbled on the mountain like you were about to fall. And I went to grab, and you said to me, "Are you Ira Lake? You used to pastor a church in Orange County." And what did I do?
Deny it.
I denied it. I said, "No, that's not me." And then you got mad. "No, stop playing with me. Tell me your name." And when I finally told you my name, that's when your story came out. And by that time, we were literally sitting at the foot of the cross.
Yes.
So I want to thank you today, Sarah, for coming and being our special guest on the Dr. Lake Show. You have shared something personal and private, but I believe that people who would watch this show will find healing. And I believe that your story will help a lot of people to get from that entanglement of grief. Does it ever go away, Sarah?
No. The anniversaries are always hard. And in the beginning, I would always get sick around his birthday, the date that he died. And I didn't recognize what was going on. It was a few years later when I realized that it was symptomatic, that what I was experiencing was the time that he died, and and his birthday would trigger all of those emotions, and I would literally be sick.
Like physically
Like
sick.
physically sick. You'd have stomach pain, you'd come down with the flu, you'd have some kind of physical illness. And it took me years to realize that they were related to his birthday, to the day that he died. And up until now, I can connect the dots. I know when I'm starting to feel ill, or when I'm just feeling depressed or blue, I know the date is right around the corner. And sometimes listening to a song or looking at a picture or just something out of the blue will trigger a memory, and you cry and you think, what am I crying for? It's just something that triggers it.
For those of you watching this program, there is no set way to grieve. Everybody grieves differently and in their own way. What I am really stressing is you must take the time to grieve. Writing is a great way. Journaling is a great way. It allows you to get a lot of things out. Sometimes you need to go to a park or to the ocean and sit quietly in your car and scream and yell and get mad. Sometimes you have to go out and break things. Whatever you need to do to deal with your pain, you must do it. For if you don't, you can hurt yourself not only emotionally, but there will be a physical reaction that can be more dangerous than the emotional pain. And so I'm encouraging you to grieve, and you should get help. One of my specialties is grief and bereavement counseling. It is not a long process, but it is a process that will help you unlock some of that pain and deal with it in a positive and objective way, to the point where you can at some point in time go home and remove those valuable loved one items from that loved one, or not. You can look at it and not be moved to tears or suffering, but it doesn't go away. The memory is always there, but it just lessens. And then because of our faith, we know that one day, real soon, he who will come, and there will be an end to death and dying as we know it. I encourage you to seek help. And if you're watching this program today, you can call us here at Intasic Family Counseling Services. Our number is 951-774-1367. That's 951-774-1367. Or you can visit us at our website, www.imtasik.org. That is www.imtasik.org. We would love to help you, and I hope and pray that you've been blessed from watching this show. Once again, thank you for tuning in to the Dr. Lake Show. I'll see you next week.